The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website at agingpartners@lincoln.ne.gov.
On this episode of Live and Learn, Kristen Stoes and Judy Hart discuss caregiving. Harlan Johnson and Dave White talk about the multi-generational business Baker Hardware. Lita Powell Drake talks with Bowling Hall of Fame member Ruby Dill. And Tim Francis discusses women-owned businesses with Jerry Braymeyer.
Welcome back to Live and Learn. I'm Kristen Stoes, and we are going to be talking about caregiving today, but with a different approach. Everyone has their own definition of a caregiver. My guest today, Judy Hart, has been collecting stories of caregiving, and she has come up with a multitude of definitions for this all-encompassing word. Welcome, Judy. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Kristen.
You bet. You are first and foremost a teaching artist and producer. Could you please tell us your path in the performing arts industry?
Well, first off, I'm the second of 5 children. Grew up in eastern Pennsylvania, so I'm the peacemaker in my family. So that's probably the best way. Lived on the East Coast, joined Actors Equity in 1978, SAG in 1981, had a professional career on the East Coast, and then moved to Nebraska in 1989. Had to reinvent myself, and that was the beginning of the Angels Theater Company.
And you were the founding member and past executive director of the Angels Company.
I am.
What is the mission of that?
Well, we're a women-centered theater company, which means we put women at the center of everything we do, or at least we try to.
Okay.
And we try to give Lincoln, the members of our company, we try to give them an artistic home and a place where they could create new projects. So we focus on new work and member-driven projects.
That is a wonderful outlet for Lincoln.
Yeah,
talent.
thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we are a talented community.
And that was started about 23 years ago, is that
Well,
correct?
91 we started
91.
talking about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And when and why did you start to focus on caregiving as a creative subject? Because that's a little unusual.
Well, I'm female, and we actually had talked a little bit about this when we originally met. But when I sat down with Sherry Cole Weber and Pippa White, we were both in our early 40s in 1991, the math, and we were talking about parenting and transitions in our life. And when we were talking about, wasn't it interesting that there was always a spiritual component to transitions in our life? And we were talking about being caregivers of our children. But we were the sandwich generation then. Our parents were still alive. So we were caring for our parents and caring for our children and trying to make theater about what was important to us. So that's really where it started.
Okay. And so this project Caregiver began.
It did.
Tell us a little bit more in depth about what that project has taken on for you.
Well, I'll go back a little bit.
Okay.
So in the I think it was about 2005, the Angels Theater Company participated with National Public Radio and Public Television on a national initiative focusing on caring for your parents. Right? So that was the first thing. And then in 2007, we did a production with Savannah Pines called Grace and Glory. And Lita Powell Drake was in that one, so I'm going to get Lita's name in there.
Good.
So 2007. And then, I guess, where are we, 2013. In 2010, we were talking about creating our theater season for 2011. And we decided that we would do two productions focusing on caregiving, which would be produced at the Lead Center, and it was last March. And I would collect stories, individual stories from people in the community as sort of the dust around the project last year. Okay. So that's when I started collecting personal stories.
Oh, I see, I see. And those productions were very well received last spring.
Yeah, they were great.
Yes,
Thank you for that.
That was very successful. So during your interviews, when you talk to people with these caregiving stories, you said that you like to start with the question, when did you first identify yourself as a caregiver? And I think that's a really important way to start out, and I'm guessing you've had a wide range of answers to that.
Absolutely, from friendship to end-of-life issues to, we had a workshop, a multi-generational workshop at the Lead Center during the production last spring.
Okay.
And we had teenagers and seniors together. And the teenagers said, well, I don't know about end-of-life issues, except sitting with my grandmother or helping my grandfather, but I'm certainly, I take care of my pets at home, and I take care of my siblings. So, you know, there's a broad scope of what it means. Is it from caring for somebody who needs your help to being an advocate for somebody at the end of their life? So it really, I talk to caregivers who are in the process of caregiving, and I've also talked to caregivers who have already finished their caregiving. So.
Sure. Did you ever have anyone say, gee, I never thought of myself as a caregiver until after the fact, when I looked back and I thought about what I had done?
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't say women do that, but I think friends do that. I think they say I wouldn't call myself a caregiver necessarily, but I know I was in the process of caregiving.
So maybe not in the traditional sense.
Yeah, but now in 2013, the word caregiver has taken on a different connotation because of all the resources, because of the healthcare system. It really is a job now, a caregiger.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it used to be part of your family or part of your world.
Sure.
And now it's a job title.
Sure, exactly. Have you learned anything new or especially unusual hearing these stories?
This probably answers a question later on, but I think caregivers have a special gene. I think the people that are willing to call themselves caregivers, they are advocates, they are mentors, they are witnesses. I think they see people as whole people, not just a disability or not just a challenge, but they still see that that person alive in the community, and they support that. You know, they're there for their friend, their loved one.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's so important to keep that person active in whatever they enjoy.
Absolutely, and to take them on whatever terms you get them that day. So.
Yes, and that is very important as well. I understand that part. Is there a common thread that you've heard that runs through all of these stories?
Sadness and honor, probably. The sadness of the loss of the person that they knew. I think caregivers are proud people too. They know they've done an honorable thing. And most people talk about it in the past, and every single person I've talked to says, I wouldn't have traded that time for anything. So, and that's it's my personal story too. I wasn't around much for my father's death. My family's in eastern Pennsylvania and I'm here, but because I was in the middle of caring for my children. But when my mother died in 2001, I learned about resources I had no idea about.
Yes.
Hospice, I didn't know about hospice. I just didn't know about all of the support that was there for me as a caregiver.
Caregiving is something that's very difficult to say yes to, but it's impossible to say no to.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the way I look at it.
Some people do say no, and it causes
down the road it might even be harder.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I've heard a lot of those stories too.
I'm sure you have on all sides of it. Were there some surprising positives in these stories?
Oh, the laughter and just the humor that goes with it. Because everybody will say, there was this time when we were sitting together and Mom asked me, you know, and each story is so specific. But yeah, there's humor. There's so much humor. And sometimes you just have to laugh at your situation, you know, and I think once you just laugh at it until you cry, then it's like, oh, I've cleansed my palate. Let's begin again. So.
Yes, I'm sure that that's very true. I often said if I lose my sense of humor, I've lost everything. Because, and you live for those moments, I think.
Yeah.
Those happy times when you can really enjoy those moments.
I think, but we tend to remember the bad ones. when it's those, you cherish those happy moments.
Yes, yes, but those are the ones that last forever.
Yes,
that's
indeed.
for sure. That's for sure. Did you find that any of these caregivers regretted their participation as a role of the caregiver?
Not one.
Not one.
Not one. And they want to share their story because they want a witness to the journey that they've been on. And that idea of witnessing their ability to advocate in that overwhelming emotion, you know, we're strong people, and I think we need to talk about that, not our weaknesses, but our strengths.
Sure, sure, sure. But that's so interesting. No matter how difficult the situation, they were glad that they were there.
Yeah, and a couple of people who are still right in the middle of it, they say, I am so tired, but I want to be the person that's there for my friend.
Yes, 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 I can understand that. Has your personal definition of caregiving changed after hearing all of these stories?
Totally. Totally. It's, I don't even know where to begin with that one, but I'm constantly listening. I hear somebody say something about caregiving and my antenna goes up, and it's like, oh, I should talk to that person. I don't have my recording equipment with me. So yeah, I think my radar is different. I see caregiving everywhere. From nurturing college kids to helping somebody take their bag out of the supermarket. But those people, I'm not recording their stories. The stories I'm recording are the people who are willing to sit down at a table with me and say, this is how it was for me.
Do you have some personal excerpts from something that you would like to share with us today, Judy?
I thought this was interesting. When we did our production last year, I asked a lot of my friends if they had personal caregiving stories, and some people wrote stories. So this is one that Melody Landis wrote. I'm just going to read the beginning of it. Right. I remember when I entered that dicey era of early adolescence when you all of a sudden become more aware of death. So, I mean, we're talking about death, and not everybody's talking about death.
Yes.
This one was written by Mary Harris Christensen. Caregiving is always a predecessor to loss. We lose the person that we've known in some way, whether it's from disability, dementia, or death, it's a loss. So, but isn't it interesting that out of all the stories I've collected, that loss is a gain? After you can travel the journey of the pain.
Well, you know that you've won some battles along the way, and that's so important.
You know, there's an interesting thing right now that caregiving, there's the caregiving websites that people who are receiving care can keep a journal of how to ask for help. That was a resource that I wasn't really aware of 5 years ago. And the more people I know that are getting sick, they can advocate for themselves now a little bit better than in the past.
Yes, and that's so important as well. There is a caregiving workshop coming up. Could
you
tell us about that a little bit?
You have the dates. Is it March 24th and 25th?
I believe they'll put them on the screen.
Oh, yes, because I won't remember.
I think it's April.
Oh, it's April. Oh, Lord. Yes, April. Yeah, it's at Mahoney Park, and it's the respite care. And they're offering a workshop for caregivers, and I'll be there collecting stories.
Wonderful.
So
it'll be a perfect place for someone to be able to share their story with
absolutely.
you.
Or they can sign up for a time. Not everybody, they have the option of getting massage, getting their nails done, or talking to me.
Well.
So
I think you'll get quite a few.
Yeah.
And some of the topics covered were so interesting, and I love the one, using music in the caregiving journey. Don't you think that music is such a wonderful equalizer?
Absolutely.
For any situation, really.
Absolutely. And it's either our music or the people we love their music. It could be generational.
Yes.
So
that is exactly right. So what is your next creative step? After you have collected all of these stories, then what?
I have to figure out how to put them on stage, because ultimately my goal is to create a performance piece that could travel.
Okay.
Actually. So I'm going to follow in the steps of Anna Deavere Smith, who did Fires in the Mirror, Eve Ensler, who did the Vagina Monologues, and Lily Tomlin, who did Intelligence in the Universe. But there are many guides for me that are kind of giving me a way to organize my information.
I see.
So I want my next project about caregiving to be uplifting and to celebrate the caregiver, not the loss of the person being cared for.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, I know that you have poured your heart and soul into this.
Oh, thank you.
We thank you so much for being here. I did want to end our segment with just one quick quote from Maya Angelou because I thought it summed up everything so beautifully. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And Judy, many people thank you for giving a voice to that very unsung responsibility.
Well, thanks, Kristen.
Much. Yes. And thank you to our viewers for continuing to live and learn.
What does Medicare cover? How can I afford to keep living in my home? When I need help with house and yard work, who can I turn to? Why am I so tired? Am I eating right? Should I exercise? Where can I go for answers to my questions about aging?
Aging Partners is the place to call when you have questions on aging. Our experts are here to help you with unbiased answers for you or your loved ones. Aging Partners, we're only a phone call away.
The winter edition of Living Well magazine is now available. You can check it out online at lincoln.ne.gov, keyword aging, or call Aging Partners at 402-441-7070.
Welcome back to Live and Learn. I'm Harlan Johnson. You know, one of the things that intrigues me is I'm always interested in a particular operation of a store when it's been in a family business for 100 years. Well, that's my guest is today has that situation. Baker Hardware has been around for a long time. Dave White is the fourth generation manager of Baker Hardware. We're going to hear a little bit about the history of Baker Hardware. And so, Dave, welcome to the Live and Learn show.
Thank you.
All right, now let's start with the beginning. Over 100 years ago, who started Baker Hardware? Obviously, it has a name identification.
It does. It was actually started by my great-grandfather Leon Baker. He had been born and raised in Pennsylvania. As a child, his mother died young, and his father was off doing whatever. So all that I can figure out is that he lived with his grandparents and worked at a train station as a young man. And at some point, I know not why, he ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska, in at first the harness business, and then he started working for several hardware stores in downtown Lincoln.
Okay, now, did he actually then start Baker Hardware as we know it today?
He actually went to work, the last place he went to work before he started Baker Hardware was a firm called Nebraska Hardware, which is at 9th and O. And that's had several share owners, and he was one of them. And at some point he bought them out. It was March of 1909, and it became Baker Hardware.
Okay, so now who's next in line? How does the succession go here?
Well, the succession was shortly thereafter. Even though Leon, and I've got to throw in some of my personal recollections from the genealogy I've done. Leon, even though he was from northern Pennsylvania, he did not like the weather here, believe it or not.
Didn't like Nebraska weather?
He did not like the Nebraska weather. He, according to my mother, he contacted the National Weather Service to find out which parts of this country had the least amount of change in their climate. Now, you and I might think Florida or Arizona or whatever, but no, he went to Eureka, California, on the California North Coast. If you've ever been to Eureka, California, it's cold and wet all the time. But he liked that, and he went out there in about 1914 or 1915, as far as I can determine, and left the store to his son, my grandfather, Louis Baker. Now, Louis had 4 daughters in rapid succession, and at some point, Leon, the great-grandfather, invited the family out to Eureka, California, because he wanted them to move out there and be with him. And my grandfather loaded up the family and went to Eureka, California, decided they didn't like it at all, and came back to Lincoln. And my grandfather, Lewis, ran the store then until his retirement in about 1963, I believe.
Okay, now the location for that store was?
The location for that store all those years was at 9th and O, where the Holiday Inn parking lot now is.
We've got some pictures here that bring those up. And so, okay, 9th and O, people can identify with Holiday Inn parking lot.
Yes, that was there until that building stood there somehow, because I actually hate to age myself, but I actually worked there for my first few years as a teenager, and it was a huge, dirty, dusty, unair-conditioned building. But luckily, when they decided to build the Hilton Hotel back at 1971, 72, somewhere in there, there was a group of investors that wanted to build the Hilton Hotel, which they did. And one of them was Bennett Martin, who my dad knew, and my mother was actually Bennett Martin's secretary at one point. And Bennett says to my dad, "Hey, I've got this other piece of property at 8th and N. I'll trade you your old building for that location." And so we moved in 1972.
So that's thus the history of 8th and N Street. All right.
That is right.
Now, next in line, we go to the White family.
My dad, R.L. White, started working for Mr. Baker in high school, I believe, either high school or early college, as a clerk, whatever year that would have been, and worked there throughout college. And then actually, as I said, my grandfather had 4 lovely daughters, and he became acquainted with one of them, my mother-to-be, Constance White, and they ended up getting married, graduating from Teachers College, and he actually left the company to take a teaching job in North Dakota State in Fargo, North Dakota. So they moved to Fargo, North Dakota. My dad had a job, my mother didn't. They spent one winter there, and then my mother politely informed my father that he could stay there if he wanted to, but she was coming back to Lincoln. You can imagine how that conversation
I know how that ended up.
So they came back to Lincoln, and he worked for Mr. Baker again, and then started his own company within the Baker Hardware building in 1949, selling more commercial type products.
Yeah, now I remember him working with contractors, almost like it was a wholesale business or something, but
close.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that operated simultaneously with Baker Hardware for a number of years, and then sometime in the 60s, my parents bought out Lewis Baker, my grandfather.
Okay, and so your dad operated it then till his death, what?
He died in 1982, and he basically operated it all that time.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And when did you diversify to some suburb operations? Was that at that time?
Yes. We opened up a store out at Gateway, and I'm not going to be able to tell you the year. Early 70s, and we operated that for 15 to 20 years until we started having trouble with the Gateway management. And as it turns out, the reason that we were having trouble with them is that they wanted to bulldoze that building, and the driver's license bill, you remember, that was out there, and whatever else was out there to put in the buildings that are now there. The fabric shop and the...
As we now know it.
Yes, as we now know it. And then after that, at a certain point, we decided to open up a store out south at Briarhurst Shopping Center. Probably made some logistical mistakes. It was too big, and there was too much competition out there. So we operated that for our first 5-year lease and then got out of that. So, and I took over after my dad's death. We had a outside president for a short while who in 1986 I kind of evicted him and took over myself and went through several of these entities and ended up having to close the non-profitable operations, which was Gateway and the Briarhurst. And then since then we've operated just the downtown store, and it does very well. I think everybody in Lincoln at some time has been in it for one reason or another because they have to.
Well,
they can't find things.
Their demise was my advantage because I think I have in my shop still some finish materials, some deft and varnishes and stuff that I bought when you were going out of business out in Gateway and down south as well.
And that's, yeah, and I don't want you to try to bring those back because there's no credit for them.
Okay, I can't return them. All right. Let's talk about your family, Dave. Children?
My wife and I, my second wife and I, Shelby, are combined. We got married 6 years ago, and we have a combined 6 kids and 2 grandchildren. And one of the questions that you obviously people ask is, which one of those kids is going to take over the business?
Sure.
And the answer at this point is none of them, because they've all got better things to do than take over a hardware store.
Well, they've probably seen Dad spend some long hours and frustrating budgeting and that sort of thing. That's not for me. Huh?
Some long hours some time ago. To be quite honest, these past few years, I've had a manager for 10 years who does an excellent job, and I've had a bookkeeper, the same bookkeeper, for 25 years. And believe me, when I leave the store for a week or two, I am not missed. They do fine without me. So.
Oh, yes, I've come, and I find that you're enjoying the summers out in Estes Park, Colorado, and the business is going on. Now, I know you've seen a lot of changes in the hardware business. You mentioned your grandfather having a harness business. You probably haven't sold a set of harness for a long time. But,
we have not sold any harness. In the old store, I remember when I first started out, we did have actually dynamite stored in the walls of the building. We had a dynamite vault where we sold dynamite, if you can believe that, downtown Lincoln.
There you go.
But at some point, the powers that be decided that wasn't a good idea, so we had to get rid of the dynamite. But yes, it's changed tremendously. When I first started working, the manager didn't have a whole lot of experience at ordering, and that was kind of something that I like to do. So I was doing all the ordering for the store at the age of 18, and I really liked it. But the problem is it was all up here. You have no control like you do now. Now with the technology, obviously, you get all sorts of information, too much information almost, but it makes the day-to-day ordering primarily so much easier than it was in the past.
Of course, the computer and that technology.
Checking out and
what's your inventory and
automatically updating orders, transmitting orders back and forth, and so the advent of technology makes it much easier. Yes.
Okay. Personal anecdotes. You've mentioned about grandfather. Interesting stories of things that you've got for somebody, or
things that we've got for somebody. No, I can't remember any terribly interesting things that we've got for somebody, but we constantly one of the things that we do as a matter of course is that if we don't have something, there's Ace warehouses all over, and if they don't have it, my manager and we have several others trained that they can go to about any lengths to find that product if it's made and get it at fairly rapidly. As you know, you can order online and get things fairly rapidly now, and we do take advantage of that, and we do a lot of almost wholesale business with some of the larger clients around University, Burlington Northern, different ones like that.
Okay.
You know.
Well, I know I've found things maybe after looking for a long time at Baker Hardware, so it's been a solution for me personally. But Dave, thanks for coming and telling a little bit about a history of Lincoln and particularly a history of Baker Hardware. So appreciate you taking time and bringing the pictures and showing us a little bit about your family history. Live and Learn will be back right after this message.
What does Medicare cover? How can I afford to keep living in my home? When I need help with house and yard work, who can I turn to? Why am I so tired? Am I eating right? Should I exercise? Where can I go for answers to my questions about aging?
Aging Partners is the place to call when you have questions on aging. Our experts are here to help you with unbiased answers for you or your loved ones. Aging Partners, we're only a phone call away.
Welcome back to Live and Learn. I'm Lita Powell Drake, and I want you to meet a very good sport. We're going to talk about somebody who has an idea that's right up her alley. Ruby Dill. Ruby Dill in the Nebraska Bowlers Hall of Fame. She has been an icon, a legend, the grandmother of bowling, if I could call you that.
You can call me that.
Now, when did you start bowling?
I started bowling in high school in the GAA club, probably 16 years old, and I've been bowling ever since.
Now, GAA, for those young people who may not know about
Girls
that.
Athletic Association. That was a time when high schools did not compete against one another. We had in-school club, and that's how we competed against one another inside the club.
Now, what's happening with bowling today with the youngsters, I like what I'm seeing, because a lot of kids in high school are bowling now. The cheerleaders are out for them. It's televised. We didn't have any of those opportunities back in the good old days.
No, we just had to go in and start and let somebody try to tell us what to do. And I started at Bowmore Lanes. That's where I did my bowling when I first started. And we had some very nice people there that were very good instructors.
I love the Bowmore Lanes with that great big post. If those of you used to bowl there, the great big post was in the center, but it was charming. It was really a charming place. But you're good in all kinds of sports. Tell me some of the other sports you participated in.
Well, I played City League basketball, City League volleyball. I never got into anything else, but that was kind of basically it.
Look at the softball uniforms. I love that. When would this have taken place, Ruby?
Probably, I was probably 18 or 19, so.
Little after high school.
Little after high school, sure.
And so she could participate in women's softball. Also, she could participate in women's basketball. And I love those uniforms.
Aren't those snazzy?
Where are you in the picture?
Let's see. I have to think. I can't see it very well. The second from the right side. The second one in on the right side.
I love to look at some of these old pictures, you know, because they
look
look really chic.
They're kind of neat, yes.
Now, Ruby has been bowling all these years, and the important thing for you seniors is she is still bowling. We'll take a look at a picture of her back in the good old days. Now, what would you call that form, Ruby?
Not too bad.
not too bad.
It could have been down a little more. It could have been bent a little more, but when you get older, you don't bend quite as well.
I understand. Now, it seems to me, if I recall, almost everybody bowled. You know, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, all the leagues. In fact, you were on a league that made me laugh. It was called the Housewives League. Mm-hmm. You know,
back then we had nurseries. When we were full,
what do you mean nurseries?
We had a nursery
in the
bowling center,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Up to age, until they went to school. And of course that allowed housewives a way to come to the bowling center and bowl and have a place for their child. And we had that for quite a while, and it got to a point where they were too many liabilities.
Ah, sure.
And so the insurance part of it and all that, why it allowed us not to.
That's too bad,
be able
because
to
that would
handle it.
encourage mothers with
That's
little
right.
children, you know, to continue to bowl. Because I know the bowling numbers have dropped. I mean, I'm glad to see the youngsters coming in, but I hate to see, you know, the overall
Well, your
numbers.
daytime leagues, yes, that would be the ones that would be the one where they're not bringing in the new younger bowlers.
Well, those of you who go back in Lincoln a long time will love to hear some of the names of the bowling alleys that were there and now, you know, are no longer there. We had bowling alleys in Lincoln at, well, Idlewild and Lincoln Lane. Which one of those two was upstairs someplace
They both
downtown?
were upstairs.
Upstairs.
Yes.
Bowling, you
The
remember
Lincoln
that?
Alleys and the Idlewild.
And of course, Bowlmore right downtown, which I hated to see that go.
It was
And
nostalgic.
what came in after that?
Oh, there's a food joint.
Yeah, a food joint. A food joint. There was also, in addition to that, the Nebraska Lanes, Hollywood Bowl, 1957, that started. Parkway, 1959. The Plaza Bowl, 1961. Briar Park, Classic Lane, Sun Valley was created in 1976. Now, there's only 3 or 4, well, we didn't include Madson's, because you used to bowl at Madson's,
Yes,
too.
they did have leagues. They have a lot of leagues now that aren't sanctioned, so a lot of the university bowlers, people go there, the university kids. And so they have a good time there. And the pool, you know, they have the pool. And
Now,
so
you and your husband, Jim, purchased the Hollywood Lanes, and you had those for 25 years. Now, I know your husband's big in bowling, but what motivated you to say, well, we're going to run this place?
Well, we were offered the chance to do it, and we jumped at it. Because we
It was
both
an offer you couldn't resist.
Offer we couldn't resist, and it's been a wonderful life, really.
Now, at that point in time, you were encouraging senior leagues.
We had a huge senior league, 250, 300 bowlers.
Oh, my goodness.
They bowled 5 days a week, every day, 24 across, 24 lanes across. And there's a lot of them that are still bowling today that we had there. I see them, you know, when I go to the bowling center, I see them once in a while. But we had a huge, huge senior league.
Well, you've been bowling a long, long time. And tell me some of the changes that you have seen over the years.
Well, of course, automatic scoring.
Yes. We all remember, those of you who bowled, you have to do it by pencil and paper. And I remember when the automatic scoring came in, that was a revolution because you didn't have to, you know, do all the work.
Right.
But one day, and in fact, I think it might have been at Hollywood, I was bowling and there was an electric storm and it knocked out the computers. And everybody threw their, well, how are we going to keep score? How are we going to keep score?
Pencil and paper.
But people haven't been paying attention to the details of scoring,
Well,
so they don't really know that.
And that's why we try to teach them to know how to keep score. You never know, and to see if their score is right.
Yeah.
But now, with the computerized, there's no problems with that.
What's the highest game you've ever bowled?
I'm trying to remember. 279, I believe.
Whoa.
I believe that's
That must have been a
highest.
special occasion.
It was.
Okay, now, in addition to her bowling, which she continues to do, seniors, you also shoot pool.
I pool Adson's Bowling and Billiards. We have a pool league that started, about at least 25 years ago. A bunch of gals got together. That were bowlers, put it together, and it's dwindled down now, but we have a gal there that's in her high 80s. It's a very good pool shooter. And that's an easy game for seniors also. That's an easy thing to do.
Who was the great pool player, the one from Minnesota, the great...
Fats, Minnesota Fats.
Minnesota Fats. You pulled that out of your memory bank, didn't you?
That's the only one I know.
Oh,
That's the only one I know.
He was really wonderful. There's a lot, combination in terms of focus. I see a lot of similarities in between that, you know, and bowling.
And that's very easy on you. You don't have to. You don't have to throw a ball, but.
Well, you've been honored in the Senior Nationals, and the fact that you are still bowling at your young age, what kind of advice do you give people who used to be bowlers and they're not back anymore? What can we do to encourage you to come out and participate in bowling?
Well, actually, it's not an expensive game because the bowling centers have balls that you can use, so you don't have to purchase equipment if you don't want to, other than bowling shoes. And I don't know. I don't suppose unless they ever were in that environment, they're going to be willing to come out. When we were in the bowling center, we had a very nice lady that was in charge of our seniors. She knew a lot of seniors, and she really is the one that got a lot of seniors to bowling in our bowling center. And if you have somebody like that that's working out into the senior part of the world, why, you could get them in there, I think.
But there's still plenty of senior leagues out around. We have three bowling alleys plus Madison's left, and there are lots of senior leagues all over the place.
Well, and I think they graduate from the regular leagues as their teams begin to disband over certain areas, that they filter into the senior league part of it. And it's a little cheaper for them. Usually you get a little better price on the bowling. And it's a nice thing for them because they can come out and be with people, coffee clatch, you know, they have coffee for them. And it's just a way to get together and be out of the house for a while.
Are you talking about men's or women's leagues or both?
They're both. Seniors are both, men and women together.
Now, there has been an evolution, of course, in bowling, and the quality of the balls, the floors have changed, there have been lots of changes. But I was really surprised that Ruby bowls with, I'm going to hand it to you, what's the weight of that ball?
10 pounds. 10
pounds. That floored me because, you know, most people bowl, well, you know, some people bowl with a 16-pound ball. And then, you know, I think a lot of people may bowl with a 14 or something. But you still do well bowling with a very, very, very lightweight ball. And I'm saying that because for our seniors, you know, they don't want to throw a 16 or 14-pound ball anymore. But you can still be accurate with a 10-pound ball.
Yes, you can.
Well, you can.
Well.
Well, what's the key? What's the key?
Oh, I don't know. Probably over the years of bowling, and I have a pretty simple delivery. It's not overwhelming. You know, some people try to gyrate and throw the ball 500 miles an hour. That's exaggerating.
So speed is not a factor.
Speed is not so much as the accuracy and the roll on the ball. It's how you roll the ball. You don't throw it, you roll it. So that's about all I can say. I guess.
Well, we want to encourage people to come out, and if you haven't bowled in a while, you could, you know, just call any of our local bowling alleys. They all have senior leagues, and don't forget the Cornhuskers State Games will be coming up this summer.
Yes.
Now, you have participated in every Cornhusker State Games except one. What? Why weren't you there that time?
I was in the hospital having surgery. I was in the hospital having surgery.
Well, then you're excused. But I am so impressed with the fact that you have stayed with bowling and are still at it. And we want to encourage all you seniors. You know, that's not something you have to put aside. Come on out again. Really, come on out, guys. Gals, you can do it. Go to a lighter weight ball. They've got the balls right at the bowling alley. And you do meet lots of make new friends and everybody.
Yes, you do.
And your score is not all that important anymore, is it?
It's being with people.
Yeah.
And you can sit in your house and wither away, but get out and do things. I mean, it doesn't always have to be bowling, it can be anything, but just get out and be with people. And you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
How you like?
Well, now, I think one of the reasons you're very competitive is you had 4 brothers.
Yes. But they didn't bowl as much as I did.
They didn't bowl?
They didn't bowl. They bowled, but they didn't bowl a lot.
Oh, okay.
They weren't like me, I guess. My sister used to bowl, too. She can no longer. But, yeah, it's just something that I...
Well, one person we haven't mentioned in this whole is your husband, Jim Dill, who ran Hollywood Bowl for 25 years. And you and he got together because of bowling?
Right. Through bowling.
What attracted you to Mr. Jim?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's what I attracted to him. I don't know. We used to go out and pot bowl. I don't know what pot bowling is.
Pot bowl?
We'd go out on our day off and work and go to the bowling center and pot bowl for...
What do you mean pot bowl?
Well, quarter a game or, you know.
Oh, you mean gamble?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sure.
Oh, there was the incentive.
That was the incentive.
And you have how many children?
4.
And do they bowl?
They all bowled.
Ah.
They're not all bowling now because of their jobs. You know, they can't get back right at 6 o'clock to bowl in a league, so they sub or they come in whenever somebody wants them to bowl. But it's just a commitment that they can't make because of their job.
Well, one of the finest spokespeople, of course, Jim and Ruby Dill have been around for a long time. We hope you'll stay around for a long time again. And she can strike 3 times or 4 times in a row with a 10-pound ball. We salute you, Hall of Famer and great supporter of bowling. You've been a great asset to the game. Thank you so much. Our guest has been Ruby Dill, Nebraska State bowling champion and in the Hall of Fame. And we'll be right back on Live and Learn after this word.
What does Medicare cover? How can I afford to keep living in my home? When I need help with house and yard work, who can I turn to? Why am I so tired? Am I eating right? Should I exercise? Where can I go for answers to my questions about aging?
Aging Partners is the place to call when you have questions on aging. Our experts are here to help you with unbiased answers for you or your loved ones. Aging Partners, we're only a phone call away.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Live and Learn. I'm your host, Tim Francis. My guest today is my friend Jerry Braymeyer. I have a fascination with women who've run businesses. Mrs. Braymeyer, you've run a hardware store, you've had an antique shop and a tea room, and raised a family and helped your husband in his career.
True.
Tell us a little bit about the challenges and what motivated you to get into business. What led you into that?
Well, it was probably just the adventure of it, more or less. We had a chance to buy this hardware store in Sterling, Nebraska, and we were in Los Angeles at the time, but these people that had it for sale, we had told them whenever they wanted to sell it, we'd be interested because it was full of antiques, mostly. And so they called us when they were ready to sell, and we bought it. And then I moved out and ran it for 6 months while he finished up the work he was doing in Los Angeles. And then our son came with with his fiance, and he finished at Wesleyan, and he was ready to do something. And so then we decided, as the 3 of us or 4 of us, to start Victoria's Cousin in Lincoln, so that they would have something. But then after a year, he left, and so we sold the hardware store, and then I moved up to Lincoln and ran Victoria's Cousin.
What was the high point of running the hardware store and being in a small town?
Oh, it was the farmers coming in, and the innovation of the farmer, because they were able to figure out how to fix things when they didn't have the things to fix them with. They would improvise. I felt they were the smartest group of people in the country.
Really?
Because they really were able to make things work, that, they had to improvise a lot. And I thought it was a wonderful place. I enjoyed it.
You had fun with it?
I really did enjoy it.
Were there some special challenges?
With the hardware store?
Well, yeah.
No, not really. It was pretty easy.
Really?
Yeah, it really was.
You selected merchandise and...
I probably selected more merchandise than I needed. And I added a lot of feminine things, so that because there was no other store in Sterling that would carry that kind of stuff, so we added a lot of that kind of stuff. So we really had a general store by the time I got through there, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
That's interesting. And then you had Victoria's Cousin in the Haymarket.
We started that.
So that's kind of a big enterprise.
That was a big enterprise, because when we rented the building, it was just empty, and we had to put in everything.
Fixtures and
fixtures and everything. And so that was quite interesting, because I had never done anything like that. And then and my son did a lot of that too. We worked that out.
And then the whole business of hiring help, training help, supervising staff.
Well, there I didn't have to, because they did it. But then when he left, I had to do it. But I had these young girls out of high school often that came and applied, and I hired them because they were attractive and they could make a little better than minimum wage, because they got tips on top of the minimum wage. And so they worked for me, all those years. And it was interesting, but it was a lot of work.
I assume you have to have an awful lot of support from your family, your spouse.
Yes, my spouse was very supportive. He really was, and you know, he had his own. He was a minister, so he had a church, and he had plenty to do.
So he had his obligations.
He had his obligations, but he was very supportive.
And how long did you have the store in the Haymarket? And what?
I think we were there 5 years.
5 years.
5
and,
years.
It was a combination: antique shop, gift shop, tea room.
We served a real English tea, and we had done all the research, so I know we were doing it the right way. But you know, it was a little hard to make it in retail at that time in the Haymarket, and so we didn't lose a lot, but we weren't making much profit.
Not making
After
a lot.
a while, you know, you begin to think, well, this is probably not the best idea in the world.
It's working out for the landlord, perhaps.
Yes, it was working out for the landlord.
What kind of issues did you have to deal with by dealing with the public, or what in your background in being a minister's wife, for instance, were there some experiences that helped you in dealing with consumers and the public, or skills you brought to it?
Well, when you deal with people when you're in the church, so it's the same dealing with the public. On the whole, everyone in Lincoln, Lincoln is a wonderful place to live, and the people there were very, you know, the people that came to buy were very nice, but you just don't get the volume that you really need, and it was a very large store.
You had a lot of square footage.
We had a lot of square footage.
And this was kind of in the day before internet sales, I suppose.
Well, yeah, it was kind of that.
So
yes.
you didn't have that competing force necessarily.
No, and we were very, you know, very inexperienced people in retail. I mean, I had no business experience really, and we were trying to run it like the hardware store in Sterling, which we had an old-fashioned cash register. We didn't do anything on the computer except I took care of like the hiring the people and all that kind of stuff. I did it at home on the computer, but we didn't do any computer stuff in the store, even with the inventory. So actually we came out okay in the end. I didn't end up in any debt when I sold out, so I felt like it was a great learning experience. I had a wonderful time with it, and if I was a rich woman, I would have kept doing it.
But you weren't going to get rich doing it.
No.
I'm sure you made some friends from your help and from the customers over the years.
Very nice people, yes, all of them were.
But that's been a good 20 years ago, hasn't it?
It was a long time ago.
So the Haymarket's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, but it's still a very exciting place.
Oh, yeah.
I find. But now it's mostly businesses that are in restaurants and that kind of thing. There's a little retail there, but not much even yet.
Not very significant.
No.
What kind of counsel, what kind of advice would you have for young people looking to get into business, or what would you have done differently if?
Well, I think for a young person trying to get in business, the first thing you have to realize is you're not going to make any money. I mean, mostly to be prepared. You might be lucky, but be prepared not to, so don't expect to pull a salary down while you're working. Fortunately, my husband had a position, so we could get by. Because we didn't do much draw for ourselves out of that.
But having capital would be critical.
Capital is very important. You have to get a good loan, and then hopefully you can pay it back, which we were able to. And
doing your homework before you start.
I would say that's good advice, yeah.
Or apprenticing for a like-minded business.
Well, you know, it's just, yes, there's a lot of kinds of things like that you can do. And the more research you do, they'll probably talk yourself out of it, maybe.
You have to sometimes go into things kind of blindly, or you'd never go into it.
Well, that's true. That's true. And, you know, but it was an adventure for us. And again, if you have a spouse, it helps a whole lot, because then that kind of takes the pressure off. You need that extra income.
It's, I can see how it would, it's kind of a 24/7 obligation, though.
Yes.
Because it all rests on your shoulders.
It is that.
If the help doesn't show up,
yeah,
or
you got to fill in.
If they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Are there other kinds of businesses you would like to have run? What if you're going to start now? What kind of business would you?
Just the antique business without the tea room.
just a retail store.
Yeah, that would be fun. Oh, yeah. But again, I'm retired and I'm having too much fun. I'm not about to go back into business.
But business has served you well.
Yes. Yeah, it was a great experience, really was. I'm never sorry that I did it. I learned a lot and I met a lot of wonderful people. And, so it was well worth it.
And you'd encourage others to?
Absolutely. If go for it. you know, but just be prepared.
Be prepared.
Don't expect to get rich right away.
Do your homework.
Yeah.
Have some capital. For women in business, I think there's an extra challenge because I think there's a perception that they don't have the emotional stamina that men have, or and I think there's an awful lot of businesses where women are in the background making things successful, perhaps, and don't get credit.
Well, I think with a couple, that's very nice because you should be supportive of each other. I mean, my husband was very supportive in that business.
And skills.
He helped in every way that he could.
And skills that complement each other.
Yes. So, yeah, it's really nice. If you're on your own, it's harder, I would think, but not impossible.
Not impossible.
No.
I think there's a lot of examples in Lincoln. And I think Lincoln's comprised of a lot of successful small businesses.
Probably.
That we don't really acknowledge or...
Well, there's a lot of new little restaurants in Lincoln, and they're very interesting to go to.
Well, especially with the immigrant population.
Well, yes, that's a huge change since we were here before.
And very motivated and very ambitious.
It's much more diverse.
Yes, there's always opportunities, I think.
It's very interesting.
For those who are prepared.
Well, Lincoln's a wonderful place to live.
Well, it's it's an easy place to live, I think, and it's fun to show it off when out-of-towners come in.
Well, you have the university, and then you have all these events, and then you have, you know, just easy to get to places.
Yes,
yes. So, it's a grand place to live.
Well, I want to thank my guest, Jerry Braemar, for joining us today, and thank our viewers. And I want you to remember, it's never too late to live and learn.